From the Washington Convention Center in downtown Washington, I'm Mark Golub, coming to you from the 2015 AIPAC National Policy Conference. Once again, we're here to cover the plenary sessions, some of the breakout sessions, and we'll also have a chance to speak to some of the individuals who are presenters here, conversations with those who are lending their insight to some of the critical issues confronting Jewish life today. We want to begin by showing you a conversation with Bret Stephens, and then Ellie Cohanim will be speaking to John Medved here on JBS, celebrating all things Jewish, expanding Jewish understanding. There are many wonderful people here speaking at the 2015 AIPAC National Policy Conference, but the one person that people are especially anxious to see and hear is this guy right here, Bret Stephens, Pulitzer Prize winning writer for the Wall Street Journal, whose new book, America in Retreat, is fabulous, and you were out of this world. By the way, I don't know how you
This
can,
is a really tough interview,
I don't know how
Mark.
you're standing up. You spoke 3 hours in a row, and each time it was spectacular. So I will just
come to all three.
I'm a glutton for you. Okay, so listen, I just want you to amplify a couple of points you made.
All right.
Okay, number one, I want you to talk about what you think the responsibility is of Democrats in the House of Representatives and in the Senate when, in fact, somebody comes to speak, in this case Benjamin Netanyahu, and it seems to be some kind of conflict with the President of the United States, and now the Democrats have an allegiance to the White House. And at the same time, you said some pretty strong things. And again, Bret, by the time people see this, Benjamin Netanyahu will have already spoken. My question is one of concept for you. What would you say to members of Congress about the importance to either have been at Netanyahu's speech or in general, when this happens, what's their responsibility?
I think it's two, if not threefold. One is, as small d Democrats, democracy is about listening to the other side and listening to views that you might not agree with. And so in that sense, the congressional Democrats have that responsibility. Second of all, they have a responsibility to the branch of government they serve and to which they belong. Congress is a co-equal branch of government. Netanyahu is in Congress at the invitation of Congress. This is not something that requires the assent of the White House one way or the other. And I think those Democrats should be careful about squandering those congressional prerogatives, the sense of who they are as equal members of government along with the administration, whatever the political loyalties they may have to the president or the liabilities they will incur for opposing him. But finally, I would do it as capital D Democrats, which is to say that these people, Democrats, are by and large liberals. And Israel is the only state in which liberal values have any respect in the Middle East. Iran is the most illiberal, the most anti-women, the most homophobic regime in the world today. And the Prime Minister is coming to warn about the dangers of allowing such a regime to acquire or get close to acquiring nuclear weapons. So as Democrats and liberals, perhaps above all, they should welcome Mr. Netanyahu's message. And I think their voters should hold them to account. Many of them love to profess their support for Israel and are good when it comes to easy votes like the Iron Dome appropriation. But the votes that matter are the hard votes. And we're at that moment when it's a hard vote, when they're being asked to make a serious choice. I think people should look carefully at what they do, and I think it should inform the way they vote.
You know, the people in the Jewish community who have been upset by Netanyahu's coming say that he is actually undermining bipartisan support for Israel and that he has needlessly poked his finger in the president's eye. In terms of those two objections that we hear not only from Democrats, but from Jews who are, committed to the Jewish people, what would you say about those two arguments?
Well, look, the reason why the Prime Minister is giving the speech now is not being dictated by his political calendar primarily. It's being dictated by the calendar imposed by negotiations, because we are being told by the administration and by Iran as well that they will have a framework agreement by the end of March. So either the Prime Minister speaks before a fait accompli, or he's forced to speak after after he's dealing with some kind of deal, some kind of agreement. I think it makes sense to influence our legislators before they've come to before an agreement has been reached than simply bemoan after the fact. And ultimately, by the way, the person or the party that is actually intruding on someone else's politics is the Obama administration, because after all, there's no question that Obama thinks that it can strong-arm and humiliate Netanyahu, much as, say, the George H.W. Bush administration did the same with Yitzhak Shamir back in 1992 to get a result, the result they would prefer in Israeli politics. So, you know, what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the proverbial gander. And I think people ought to be mindful, and certainly those who are talking about the politics in this contretemps, in this disagreement, ought to be mindful that it is the American administration that is at least as guilty of playing politics with Israel's political system as the other way around.
I have said that I do not believe this will in any way do real damage to bipartisan support of Israel in Congress. Am I being naive?
Well, it's too soon to say.
Are you worried?
Look, in its early years, Israel was overwhelmingly a cause of the Democratic Party, and we can name many leading Republicans who were not sympathetic to Israel. That began to shift over time, and then we had a happy period when Israel was genuinely a bipartisan cause. I hope it remains a bipartisan cause. It's important for it to be bipartisan. But Israel has survived periods when it was a more partisan cause, and it may have to survive them again. And again, the onus, I think, is on Democrats, and particularly liberal Democrats, not to demand that Israel get right with them, but for them to get right with Israel. That is to say, are they in favor of the one country, I'm repeating myself now, that actually defends and embodies the very values they seek to, they proclaim? I think that's the real issue. And will they defend Israel when Israel is in genuine jeopardy and in genuine danger? So those are questions that Democrats should be asking themselves, rather than having Israelis or American Jews or supporters of Israel falling over themselves over what forms of protocol they might observe in order to appease a capricious White House.
Okay, only one more question. I know you do not have dinner regularly with the president.
Not regularly.
So it's unfair to ask you what's going on inside his mind and heart. But what we seem to have seen happen is that a very strong sanctions policy brought Iran to its knees and ready to negotiate. Then the administration lifted those sanctions. And it seems to me now, many people are viewing it, and I think you do too, that in fact the administration is facilitating Iran's moving towards a nuclear weapons threshold. I want to know two things from you in terms of your sense of where the U.S. is on Iran. Why hasn't the United States, why is the administration so reluctant to say out loud they're going to impose the sanctions again? And what is the real motivation? What's the real agenda here, as far as you're concerned, on what's driving administration policy on Iran?
Well, I've written a book called American Retreat. I have to make a plug for it. And it's clear that this administration is desperate to get out of the Middle East, just as it's desperate to get out of other traditional...
Altogether?
Yes, for the most part, this is the policy. The view is no good thing has ever come from American involvement in the Middle East, and Iran is the rising power, and we have to get used to the fact and perhaps try to create the basis of a relationship going forward with a future Middle Eastern hegemon. I think that is a fatal prescription for the Middle East. It's a fatal prescription for our traditional allies and our friends, and it is ultimately a devastating prescription for the United States because, you know, just as Leon Trotsky once said, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. Well, we may not be interested in the Middle East, but as we're learning every day, the Middle East is interested in us. And so to look away and to appease Iran it reminds me of Churchill's favorite line, which is to feed the crocodile in the hopes that he eats you last.
And you are worried that we're appeasing at this moment?
Of course we are. We are refusing to go after Bashar Assad for the sake of appeasing Iran. Our entire policy in Iraq is constructed around appeasing Iran. Every step that we are taking so far in these negotiations, above all the refusal to even countenance sanctions in the event that negotiations fail, are all about appeasing Iran. This is, and people, when I make this argument, I'm always amused by the reaction. Number one, they'll say, well, it's not appeasement. And number two, they'll say, but, actually appeasement isn't such a bad thing, which, I leave it to them to resolve that, their own intellectual inconsistency.
I've said to you before, you are the brightest, most singularly important voice on the American scene today, and it is always a pleasure to stand with you, even for a moment. And I thank you. Bret Stephens here at AIPAC 2015 National Policy Conference. Kol tuv v'hazlacha. Thank you.
Such a huge honor to be here with Joanathan Medved. Joanathan, you spoke a lot about what's going on in Israel, and the economy there is clearly flourishing. What do you think is the next hot opportunity for the Israeli economy?
I think the next hot opportunity is OurCrowd. I'm excited about my business. We're linking up tens of thousands of people all around the world with Israel's startup ecosystem. Today we have 7,000 accredited investors, thousands others who are waiting to be accredited. And the idea is that there's so much excitement in Israel, whether it's in cybersecurity or in medical devices or in the Internet of Things or in the environment, where there are these great companies who are going to change the world. But until now, people haven't had a chance to be able to invest in them directly. We're giving people that chance. So you go to OurCrowd, you sign up, you get to look at the menu of options. You don't have to commit anything until you're smitten, right? You find something that resonates with you and you feel that's the one, then you get to invest. Now, unfortunately, it's limited to this notion of an accredited investor. You have to have $1 million of net worth or $200,000 of income. Otherwise, the SEC doesn't like that, so we play by the rules. If you meet those criteria, you're welcome to our site, and then the whole world of startup opportunities opens up for you, and you can start to invest. And this investment hopefully will not only be good for you, but really good for Israel, because we're essentially building the next generation of companies that are employing Israelis, that are building the U.S.-Israel relationship, and also in many cases helping the world. One of our companies, Rewalk, which is an exoskeleton, has been here at AIPAC before. We invested twice. That company has now gone public. It's trading above its offering price. But it's not just about making the money and employing the Israelis and the Americans, by the way, headquartered here now in Boston. But it's changing those lives of paraplegics who are now getting up out of their chair. So these companies with triple bottom lines, people, profits, and the planet, those are great. And we would welcome you to join us at OurCrowd.
Joanathan, if I heard you correctly before, if I'm smitten by what's on the list, it's a $10,000 minimum investment, is that correct?
That's correct. $10,000 gets you into a deal.
Okay, and so Joanathan, what I know that Israel has been in the lead in high tech and a lot of the other sectors that you mentioned, but if you were to advise somebody right now, what would you say is the most up-and-coming field for Israelis right now?
The Internet of Things, okay? In other words, today the world has about 5 billion connected devices, whether it's mobile phones or tablets or computers. We all rely on the Internet. But that 5 billion is now going to 50 billion or 500 billion. Everything we know, such as this microphone, your camera, your wearable, your watch, it's all going to be connected. And as this world gets more and more connected, there's huge opportunities to improve lives, both in health and in terms of security and in terms of simply education. And Israel is going to be really good at this because this is what's called embedded software. It's the combination of really cool miniature hardware, low battery drain, together with really, really soft and efficient software. You take all this stuff and then you bring it up to the cloud, okay, where you aggregate what's called big data and then use analytics. You can change the world. And Israel is going to be a leader in the Internet of Things.
Fabulous. And Joanathan, you're here at the AIPAC Policy Conference. I'm sure that you get millions of invitations every year. Why are you here at AIPAC?
Because if you're not here at AIPAC, you're nowhere. Right? This is the single most important gathering of the Jewish world anywhere on the planet. There is no other conference where 16,000 people gather. There's no other conference where right now, at this moment, we had a session, full house, maybe 1,000 people in the audience. There were 6 other sessions just on Israel's economy and startup business. There were like 5,000 people here discussing that topic, while another 5,000 were discussing Iran and the geopolitics, and 5,000 talking about the military. It's just where it's happening. So if you are committed Jewishly, if you're committed to Israel, if you're a non-Jewish friend of Israel, then you want to be here at AIPAC, and that's why I'm here.
Wonderful. Well, Joanathan Medved, it's wonderful to have you here at the AIPAC Policy Conference on JBS TV. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Here at the 2015 AIPAC National Policy Conference, I'm standing with one of my favorite people, and he is one of the finest analysts of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and many issues on the Middle East. You've heard him many times now on JBS. Aaron David Miller, by the way, you were brilliant.
Oh, please, Mike.
And people loved what you had to say. And I heard people gathered around you and they couldn't get enough of you. And I'm listening to some of the questions they're asking you. You spent an hour trying to help us understand how difficult any resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is. And Aaron made this fabulous point. You're not looking for peace, are you? You're looking for an end of conflict.
Yeah, an end of conflict that basically has both sides admitting that there are no more dreams or any redemption to be pursued, and all claims have been adjudicated.
Okay.
It's over. Basically 2 words, or 3 if you use a contraction. It's over.
Okay. Then I hear people come up here, and you also said it's all about leadership. But both you and Mike Herzog both said you don't see leadership in the Palestinian community at the moment, nor do you see it in near term. So I'm saying to myself, here you see all of these individuals who come up and they're asking the same question, Aaron, in one of different ways. But what if we do this, or what if we do that? Can't we make peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians? And it was as if the message you have is very, very difficult for American Jews and well-meaning Americans in general to hear. And the overarching question, which you did not raise and neither did Mike, is then what do we do in the meantime? After describing how very bleak the picture looks at the moment, the question this room ends up with is, and one guy from Yale sort of asked you that question, right. What do we do now?
Well,
and so what does I really mean is, what does Israel do now in the meantime?
Well, the question is, what does Israel want to do? And that depends on the priorities and judgments of its leadership. I mean, there are all kinds of things you can do short of a conflict-ending solution. Building from the bottom up is one of them. Reorienting the Palestinians with economic assistance, institution building, getting them back from the ICC and the international community, giving them hope. I mean, there are all kinds of things. I just don't think you can fix this. You want to fix this.
You can't fix this.
You can't fix it now. Look at the process of, I'm not a religious man, but look at the process of tikkun olam. It's a question of repairing the world. Can the world ever be repaired? I think the rabbis and sages would argue, no, it's the process of repairing.
Okay.
That's where the nobility is, and that's where the meaning of life is.
Yes.
You try to close the gap between the perfect and the good, and you know what? Over time, if you're lucky and you're committed enough, you really will make progress.
Okay. That's beautiful.
Have hope.
Okay, this is
not an illusion.
I understand.
That's the difference.
But and it's very important we hear it from you. The world seems to, however, be saying, we're not giving you time. Israel, you don't have any more time left. How many times have I heard, Aaron, whether it's Kerry or going back, even into the administrations you were part of, this is the last chance Israel has. And the reality is we've lived year after year after year. Are we at the moment when, if Israel does not make some kind of compromise that could hurt it, that the world, the international community, the EU, the United States...
The answer is no, we're not at that point.
We're not.
The facts that are important, yes, the facts on the ground are important, but the facts up here are even more important. There will come a time, I have a feeling, in which the cynics and skeptics will be right. There is no more time, but that time is not now.
I'm standing with an extraordinary individual who has done marvelous things for the State of Israel and now is with the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. It is Brigadier General Mike Herzog, and you were wonderful today, so thank you. I have two issues, one historical and one contemporary, to the extent to which you can help us understand. Do I understand that you were at Camp David with Ehud Barak?
I was.
Okay. We have heard two conflicting stories. Maybe you can clear it up. There are some who say that basically it was Yasser Arafat who turned the deal down at the last moment, and Bill Clinton never forgave him. There are others who argue, no, that basically the deal was flawed, basically flawed to its core, and that it was never close to being done, and Arafat does not merit that kind of criticism. So, Mike, what's true?
To begin with, we're not really close to a deal at Camp David.
You were not.
We're not very close to a deal at Camp David. That said, these were very serious negotiations, the first attempt of its kind to reach a final comprehensive deal between Israelis and Palestinians, a conflict-ending deal. Now, Ehud Barak made some serious proposals at Camp David, but it's my take, and I thought so before Camp David and even more so after Camp David, that Yasser Arafat did not go there in order to make a deal. He did not want to go there. It was forced on him. He went against his own will. And when he was there, he took it upon himself to reject any proposal put forward to him. So it's not that, he was coming willingly and looking for a compromise. He didn't want to go there. He felt that a deal is imposed on him. And all he said was say no to anything that was put forward. He never came out with his own ideas, with his own proposal, with his own map. We presented the maps, we presented the proposals, we made the new arguments there, and he was there just saying no and priding himself on rejecting a negative deal. So when President Clinton ultimately said after the failure of the talks that he blames Arafat, I think he knew exactly what he was saying. Some friends of mine in Israel said Arafat would not take yes for an answer.
By the way, you were a young diplomat then, yes? Younger than you are now.
I was a young officer then.
Okay. Yeah. Was it disappointing for you, or did you expect it?
I did not expect for a deal to come out of Camp David. I didn't think when we were going there that we were going to have a deal, because I didn't believe that Arafat is going there to make a deal. Still, there was a sense of history making in the air, because for the first time we're discussing the core issues separating us. The first time both sides put their hands in the fire. And that, even though I didn't expect a deal, created a sense of history making.
Yes. It was exciting for you, was it not?
It was.
Yes. All right, now I come to today's discussion with Aaron David Miller. And General, it sounds to me like what you said was, it's all about leadership. And at the moment, there is no Palestinian leadership that you feel is capable of making a deal that would create not a peace, using Aaron's term, but an end to the conflict. And then somebody asked you, do you see leadership in the offing? And again, you said no. What I want to know is, does that mean that Mike Herzog really feels that although as much as you would love to see an end to the conflict, let's not worry about peace, that basically the two peoples could live side by side without a state of war and without terrorism, that you don't believe at the moment it is anywhere in the near future for the Middle East and the Israeli-Palestinian people?
Well, I sounded a pessimistic note for the foreseeable future. I'm not saying it's impossible forever. I'm not deterministic here. I know some Palestinians who could be such leaders, but unfortunately they are not going to make it to leadership. Yes, my view is that if you really want to reach a two-state solution, it requires a lot of things, but first and foremost leadership. Leadership that can make decisions, reach an agreement, make the necessary compromises, and implement it. They also have to socialize their own people as far as peacemaking is concerned. and that's not in place right now.
Or in the near future?
I don't see it in the near future, and as I said, I'm pessimistic for the time being.
Then the last question is this. What does Israel do in the meantime? Because there seems to be enormous world pressure on Israel to either make a deal with the Palestinians or, in essence, to give up this whole idea. There would be the one-state solution and everybody gets a vote and there's no longer a Jewish state of Israel. General, what does Israel do now?
Well, my view is that Israel should seize the initiative, not leave it to others. Let not the Palestinians initiate and we respond. Let us initiate in the political field. And there's a lot of things that we can do. We can come out with a political initiative. We can forge understandings with some major Arab states like Egypt, Jordan, some Gulf states. We could take unilateral measures that don't close the door on two-state solution, leave it open, and leave the door open for negotiations, but don't make us hostages of Palestinian rejectionism, and don't put our future in the hands of Palestinians, but we can start moving and shaping our own future, our own borders unilaterally, and if we do it in a way that does not close the door on two-state solution or negotiation, we'll also be more legitimized internationally, and we'll have more international partners for doing so.
You are wonderful. It is a joy listening to you. I want to get you one day in studio and really probe your brain, and we'll discuss it. Mike Herzog.